Hello, this is Defacto Review for this week with me, Jargal Tampadarja. We select 3 topics of last week. Events happened in Mongolia. This time, the following 3 topics. First, about another step in fighting corruption in Mongolia. State high-ranking officials and their related people are forbidden to participate in state tender and public procurement. Second topic about employment and human resources policy of the country, challenges and ways to combat. Third topic about inflation, in particular in the housing market. These are 3 topics I would like to highlight this week. First, about this new law. This is about state high-ranking officials and their related people and their interests in public procurement and tender. Prime Minister Oyun Irden had introduced this draft amendments of this law to the parliament and made a speech about these changes. He particularly appealed the parliament members to start from themselves, as parliament members are conveys of people and a trust bridge between people, citizens and the state. Because there are people who confused their public jobs and their representative roles with their private interests. Those people who are nominated by those people are really working in the interest of themselves, and the people are nominated them. That's why we have a big corruption in the 3 pillars of the state, namely legislature, executive branch, and justice, court system. And it is evident from our last 30 years' experiences. We had corruptions deep inside of the mining license issuing, and also Ulaanbaatar land speculation. And also it's evident in development bank happenings of last few years. And also in the stealing coal and copper industries in the country, where mostly the high-ranking political officials are involved, or their families, because they have been giving priority or advantages to those people. So that's why we have, in Mongolia, there is the systematic corruption is created. This word is being used by this Prime Minister for last year, and in fact it is already a systematic corruption. That's why it is a matter of fighting with the systems of the corruption in the country, and along with many other actions, including, for example, 5 ish actions. Ish is the word. They begin the first alphabet of the word. We very familiar with that now. It's 5 actions for this year that the government is taking in combating corruptions, including, for example, one is Shuvu, the bird, bringing back officials run away after being connected with high volume corruptions. So it is again systematic corruption. It is not easy. We cannot overcome overnight to destroy a huge oak of corruption. So that's why, along with the 5-ish actions, and there are several laws being amended or being prepared, and it is to be discussed for this spring session of the parliament. Those laws are including the following, which is all the under new recovery policy of the state, or including with the purpose of increasing the state efficiency. First, amendments into the constitutions. Second, political parties law. And the third, this law about the high-ranking political officials, high-ranking officials conflicts of interests law. And the third, state public offices ethics law, officials ethics law. the whistleblowing law, about whistleblowing, and about the creation new court. Mostly, probably it is about having a separate court system for corruption. The last one is we are now to approve new national program against corruption. According to the UN Anti-Corruption Convention, we need to now evaluate what is done under this previous program and approve the new national program. So along with that, all this several systematic approach against the systematic corruption, the state is really hiring of doing really serious jobs in this regard, and one example clearly is this one. And this one, this has to do, for example, first of all, this conflict of interests law starts from the Mongolian president, the speaker of the parliament, prime minister, the parliament members, the cabinet members, and IMAG and the city governors and their related people, including their husbands or wife, people co-living, children, etc. All these related people cannot participate in the following things. One, state and state-owned enterprises joining international projects that is financed by international projects. You cannot participate in this. First. Second, all type of public procurement. The third, in any discounted loans, grants, and guarantees. So in this kind of actions, the above mentioned political people cannot participate. And also it is including the following high-ranking officials. One, the political party heads, the political parties which has seats in the parliament. Second, the members of Constitutional Court. The Supreme Court and the chief judges of the state Supreme Court, General Prosecutor, Public Office Council, Mongol Bank, General Election Commission, Anti-Corruption Agency, General Intelligence Agency, General Police Agency, General Taxation Agency, General Customs Agency, Emergency Agency, the department that is controlled, the coordinating state enterprises policy and public procurement agency, state general registration agency, general social insurance agency, trade and care agency, general agency, labor and social care agency, and Civil Aviation Authority agency, mining and petroleum agency, department, general geology unit, and general health agency. Those are all organizations that reports directly responsible and reports to the Great Khural and government. So it's a huge range of the public offices, and if it is implemented or approved, it will be a huge prevention of corruptions maybe happening in the future in those agencies' walls. So it requires not only certain restrictions, but it requires also probably higher salary for these officials and more productive work of those agencies. So this is the first law now already submitted to the Parliament, and along with above mentioned 6 other measures, it will be a substantial step towards fighting with corruption in Mongolia. However, it cannot solve all problems at once. As we said earlier, the oak cannot fall down overnight. but it is a substantial step towards less corruption, because in the many developed nations it was already tried. In the UK, in France, for example, before you run for political offices, if you have a businesses, you have to create trust to which that business will be trusted, and you will even you will not have a right to even call that trust and trustees. Well, it will take some time for Mongolia to create similar system, but it is serious restrictions of confusion of the public and the private interests, and hopefully it will be good food for thoughts for next candidates for political seats. So this is the first topic we'd like to highlight. Our second topic is about inflation and human resource policy. I highlight this because last Monday, the Prime Minister had met human resources department people of different industry, playing the main roles in the economy. Before the briefing of that meeting, I would like to give some picture on the labor market of the country. We have a total 1.1 million people working out of total 1.5 million labor resources of the country. And out of those working people, 1/4 is working for state sector, and the three-quarter of them is working for private sector. Is it a normal ratio of the labor force? It's not normal, and compared with many other democracies, it is the state state sector is rather higher. And as I said, out of this labor forces, only 60% or so are involved in actual labor, and the total unemployment rate in the country by now is 5.3%. But this statistic, according to the general statistics, but this statistic is relatively low because it reflects only people who filed at the related agencies as unemployment, as people who are looking for for jobs. But actually, this amount is, in reality, way higher. Why is that so higher? I would like to quote some concerns raised by the people participated in this meeting of the Prime Minister last Monday. Some concerns are, for example, we have a low salary. The main reason is the social insurance, so-called. We call it social insurance, however, this is pension and medical care, etc. All this insurance is almost 1/3 of the salary in Mongolia. If you want to increase that salary of the employee, then you will increase, this tax will be increased at the end. It's so substantial that, in particular, a large amount of employees, companies are very reluctant to increase their jobs. One reason. Second reason, there is a clear, not proper connection between education and labor market demand, jobs. This is mostly connected with the quality of people, of graduates of professional training schools, professional training schools, because in practice you need retrain of those people who just come from these schools. Other one is, again, connected with the impact of the increase in public officers' salary on the private sector. Private sector not always can compete. Not every private sector can compete with the public sector, because now if you need to increase the salary, again, you need this all social insurance to be increased. That's why the private companies cannot compete with the state employers. If we don't solve these issues, we have a quite much coming out movement of labor force from Mongolia. It's no secret that some over 60,000 Mongolians work in Korea, for example, alone. Many of them are working for physical labor in Korea, being a teacher or being people who are specially trained for higher education in Mongolia. The other thing is we have the engineer and technical professionals. In food industry, for example, we don't have any graduates for this year for mechanic engineering. And for last 4 years, we don't have any graduates. For last 4 years, we don't have any engineer in utilities, for example. And so that's why we are missing that state policy to prepare skilled people for the industry demand. So these are the reasons why we have a problem in this labor market, which is very scarce, small for 3.4 million people, and yet Mongolia is almost exporter of labor to other countries when we need so much labor domestically. And it's also because if we hire, say, employees from China, India, from any other countries, which we can, but it's very expensive because you pay a fee as a minimum salary per month per employee, foreign employee, you pay to the related state agency, which makes very expensive to hire foreign employees for their own needs. So that's why really actually there is a big problem here with the labor market in the country, the human resources usage of Mongolia. At the same time, some public sectors need to really increase of salary. For example, according to the Minister of Finance, Jiahulang, they increased the salary for health sector for last year, and this year they will start increasing salary in education, in the culture sector. So this kind of works are being doing in Mongolia, according to the last week that meeting. But however, on my side, I would like my conclusion is first we need to very clear connection of research and development of private sector with education institutions. And education institutions usually must have more sense of current and future demand of the industries, and accordingly they need to change their curriculum, etc., which is a subject of their freedom, which is not substantially provided in education sector, in particular state-owned education institutions in Mongolia. The third, to use properly the labor market, is free competition. And it's very hard to compete for private sector with the state-owned enterprises. And only free competition increases the productivity. And productivity increase causes the salary increase. If it goes in this logic, then we will have a really better productivity and efficiency. Finally, in fact, it's really very high social taxes in Mongolia per employee. And plus, because employee doesn't pay directly to the state, it is a work of employer. Employee doesn't feel that the state is taking that much big chunk of their salary. So that connection to be clear. Probably the employee needs to pay directly the tax. Then I think the salary situation will be much better, or more realistic to the market. So that's the second topic. Okay. Our third topic is inflation related to the housing. According to the Mongolian National Statistics, in Ulaanbaatar for last year, I talk about the end of April, and year-on-year base, the housing price had increased for almost 10%, 9.9%. And average price per square meter of residence apartment is now 3.5 million MNT. But it's an average price. If you go deeper into the housing market prices now, old and new apartments, new apartments, all the apartments are always around 6% less, cheaper, 6% cheaper than the new apartments. In Ulaanbaatar city, depending on the market, or depending on the location, 1 square meter residence is, with the new and old one, is 1.2 million MNT. That's the difference of new and old apartments, used apartments. But mostly it depends on the location. For example, Hangul district, which includes mostly almost all the new buildings in Ulaanbaatar city. The price is 8.8% higher, or at the level of 3.8 million per square meter. Sangunhairhan district, which is mostly occupied by Ger district, that price is 35% less than the average price. Why is this differences? In general, of course, prices depends on the locations as anywhere in the world. But the increase of 10% per last year is mostly related to the cost of construction, cost of building. In general, for the last 10 years, the apartment price have increased almost 2 times, 1.8 times to be exact. So what causes that the cost of building or construction? For example, year-on-year basis, at the first quarter, it is increase of 30%. 30%. Which includes, for example, the construction itself, the process price have increased, cost increased 6%. Material had increased 10%, and the rent of related trucks and other mechanisms have increased almost 2%, and salary yet less than 1% increases. So this is why the prices are coming up. The second, it's the largest reason of the increase is exchange rate. Unfortunately, exchange rate is in many countries where the government has a big debt, a large deficit of state budget. Mongolia is not exclusion. And now, for example, this 10% increase is related to 23% fall of Mongolian tugriks in relation to the US dollar. Almost a quarter. It's a huge weakening of Mongolian tugriks. And that's why if the cost of imported construction materials was $150 or 427,000 MNT, now it is 527,000 MNT. And around half of the construction materials of Mongolia being imported because we don't produce many of the materials. We produce now mostly out of construction materials. Cement, that's good news. We have now overcapacity for cement, for example. We have 3 large factories which are not working in their full capacity. Another big factor on increase of salary, increase of the housing price is regarded as the mortgage decrease. Mortgage volume is decreased year-on-year basis. In 2022, only 13,000 borrowers got mortgage. It is almost 30% less than a year before, and total mortgage amount was 1.4 trillion MNT, which is 7 and 8% lower than a year before. Also, the household average income had increased nominally 12.4%, but the actual income had decreased 1.5%. It's mostly because the inflation. Inflation is now, at the end of the last quarter, it was quarterly around 14%, which is way lower than a year before, because a year before, a quarter before, last June and July, there was a price hike, mostly following by the increase of the vegetables and increase of meat. Then the meat price had decreased. That's why from the 17% highest in the mid of last year, the end of the last year, it was 14%. Now we assume it's around 14% in the country, the inflation rate. Mongol Bank had issued, or they're issuing every quarterly, the inflation report for a quarter and inflation perception for next year, for the following quarter. And if 2023 perception for inflation, Mongol Bank had used the following things to be not changed much. One, that the policy rate of the central bank is 13%. And there are several goods that price is regulated by the state, like gasoline, electricity, and many Mongolian states are regulating so many prices. And then the next one is there will not be any more restrictions at the border like during the COVID time. And also the main fuel is the type of gasoline called AI 92. The price will not be changed because also it's regulated too. And the other condition which regarded not to be changed is climate conditions, and also domestic supply of foods food supply will be relatively constant, and the outside inflation will be slowly going down. That's the assumption they had for 2023 inflation forecasting. And in fact, it has a rather realistic exceptions, in particular in the current situation where China has now stopped with their policy of zero COVID, and now the logistics more or less normalized in between Mongolia and China, because also there is an international global container index, which was maybe 10 times the average during the pandemic years. Now it is still high, but a little bit higher than the average conditions. So for Mongolia, hopefully it will be not much changed. And the other thing is Mongolia succeeded to have a contract with Rosneft and to have AI 92 gas price at the border price a little bit decreasing, and in customs duty is free now through the 2023, along with the diesel. Also, this gas, there is excess taxes and the customs taxes, two taxes, but both will be exempted till the July 1st of this year. So with this changes, I think the above-mentioned prices sounds more or less acceptable. But in general, I would like to say that inflation, of course, depends on the foreign and domestic, the above-mentioned conditions. But however, inflation is always the work of the government. Wherever the government is working with a high deficit of this budget and with high, relatively to the economy, foreign debt, Mongolia has 65% level to ratio of foreign debt to GDP. substantial one inside also government one. In that conditions, inflation is always never disappear. So that's the main target, to have not state deficit first, and to have more export earning than relative to import. So that's the main conditions to having normal level of inflation in the country. Unfortunately, we are at the level of 14. The Mongol bank policy is at the level of 13. So that's where we are now, and hopefully the policymakers will be thinking twice about the state budget deficit and foreign debt. So these are the third topic, and I have today briefed you about three major topics of the events of last week. First, about the new law in fighting corruptions. Second, about the housing prices and the inflation. The third is So I have briefed you about three topics of last week: new law against corruption. Second, about the unemployment and human resource policy of Mongolia. Third is about inflation in relation to housing policy in Mongolia. Thank you very much. See you later next week.